other people will be joining us. So let's start. And those who are going to be joining us later, they will join us as we move on. Our today's lesson, we meet again. We are going to be talking about risk assessment, right? Being a very important topic that is covered under our SHEM-TREC course, which is also covered under our HIRA course, which is also covered under our HIRA course. It's also covered under our construction safety officer course. So all those people who registered for these courses, you will find a topic about risk assessment, and hence the reason why we meet today. Now, good people, let's get straight to the point, right? First and foremost, we need to talk about the reasoning behind us actually conducting risk assessment, right? The reason why should we conduct risk assessment, right? So it is important that we argue our points based on what the law is saying. So we would want to argue our points based on what the law is actually saying. The law says we need to inform. We have got a duty to inform. This is Section 13 of Occupational Health and Safety Act. It actually says that we have a duty to inform. So when you are performing risk assessment, you are using it as a tool that you will use to communicate hazards, that you will use to communicate control measures on the hazards and it. So it's very important for us to look into risk assessment as a tool that you are going to be using when you are communicating or you are making people aware. This is according to what? To Section 13 of Occupational Health and Safety, where it says you have got a duty to inform. Right? If we go back a little bit to Section 8 of Occupational Health and Safety, you should also understand that some of the points under this section says that an employer need to conduct risk assessment regularly, and a competent person must be used to conduct those risk assessment. So you can see here that I'm arguing now using Section 8. Earlier on, I was arguing using Section 13. So Section 8 has got 2 points. One point, Section 8 says that you will need to perform risk assessment. Another point that is under Section 8 again of Occupational Health and Safety, good people, it also says that as an employer, you have a duty to make your employees aware of occupational hazards, occupational risks, and also make them aware of the control measures you are putting. So in a nutshell, we are saying Section 8 is forcing us to do risk assessment. Section 13 is forcing us to do risk assessment. Let's also go to Section 18, which talks about the duties of a SHIRA. A SHIRA is supposed to what? To also assist in situations where this risk assessment is being performed. So if you go there and you check where it says that SHIRA rights and responsibilities, which is Section 18, because Section 17 talks about the appointment of SHIRAs. When you then go to Section 18, it talks about what are the duties of a SHIRA. It also stipulates that, right? So good people, you can have lots of parts from occupational health and safety that we can use to justify the reason why we should conduct risk assessment, which today we are calling HIRA, right? HIRA, we all know what HIRA is. We are talking about hazard identification and risk assessment, right? Can I just tell Lindsay, you are sharing your screen. You are actually sharing your screen. Did you realize that? So we can see what is on your screen there for some reason, but if you can just lower that down, but it's fine. Let's move on now to the next aspect. The next aspect is that we would want to talk about the types of risk assessment that can be conducted. The types of risk assessment that can be conducted. The types of risk assessment that can be conducted. All right, we have got three major types of risk assessment. Number one, we do have what we call baseline risk assessment. Right, with baseline risk assessment, we are talking about those types of risk assessment where you are actually going to be checking everything at work. Right, with this type of risk assessment, you are checking everything at work. If I would talk about a site, you will be actually talking about where the site starts up to where the site ends. Right, so here you are actually checking everything. There's nothing that should be left behind. Baseline risk assessment are usually found or are usually conducted at the beginning of a period. For instance, if we go on holidays for December, when we come back in January, we might want to start by doing a risk assessment, right? So we can be able to start by doing a risk assessment there. So another thing is that we can also find ourselves being in a position where we actually want to start work at the beginning of work. If we are going to be starting at the beginning of work, then there is a high chance that we would want to perform risk assessment, which is baseline. This baseline basically means that you will be taking care of everything. So wherever you are, good people, let's say you are at your home, or you are in your office, or you are at work, or you are in an internet cafe where you are listening me from, or in a car or whatsoever. If I tell you right now that wherever you are, you will need to perform baseline risk assessment, it basically means the entire place where you are, you will need to turn it upside down and find risks everywhere, because that's a baseline risk assessment, which means it's a bambazonge type of a risk assessment. I always tell my learners that always think about when you are doing what? When you are doing what you call that spring cleaning, right? When people are doing spring cleaning, they turn everything upside down at home and clean everything, attend to everything. At that moment, we can be able to actually say that's baseline risk assessment. Moving on to the next one, you would find that there is what we call issue-based risk assessment. Right, issue-based risk assessment is that type of a risk assessment where you are only focusing on a particular issue at that particular moment, right? You are focusing on a particular issue at that particular moment. This can be seen, say, there's a new equipment that is being bought at work, right? If you are buying new equipment, you might find that it's important for you to actually, just a second while I'm muting Tompo. Yes, right. Now, when we are doing that risk assessment where we are only focusing on a particular issue at that moment, right? On a particular issue at that moment, right? For instance, I was giving an example. If you are buying new equipment at work, right? If you are buying new equipment at work, you might want actually to do an issue based on that equipment. Another situation can be those situations where there is an incident at work, right? And that you would want to perform an issue-based assessment on that particular incident that would have taken place, right? So situation, you are actually doing a risk assessment based on that particular issue that has just happened. Moving on, good people, because this type of lesson, I'm just explaining a few things. Most of these things, you are finding them in the textbook. You are also finding them on our learning management system, which is our LMS or our online platform. The reason why we meet here is because we want to make few explanations here and there. All right, moving on to another segment of risk assessment is that let's get touch base with how you would perform risk assessment. How you would perform risk assessment. So let's look at the first maybe part, which is very important when you would want to perform risk assessment. The first important part here is that you would want to take these things step by step, right? You would want to take these things step by step for you to actually get there where there is a process for you to actually say, I have performed risk assessment. Let's look at those steps. Let's look at these steps. Usually, risk assessment is actually into 3 steps. Right, your steps here, you would have the first step is when you are actually identifying risks, right? That's the most important step, right? Where you are actually identifying hazards. Sorry to say that. So you are identifying hazards. Then the second step would be assessment of risk, and then third step is for you to control those risks. So other people, they would want to take these steps, break them down into smaller steps and make them 5, make them 6, make them 7, 8, who cares? But the truth here is that these are 3 major steps in risk assessment or in risk management. You would want first and foremost identify the hazards. All right, you are identifying hazards here. What are you actually asking yourself? You are asking that what could cause harm? What could cause harm to the people? What could cause harm to the machinery, equipment, and plant? What could cause harm to visitors? What could cause harm to maybe anything that is coming into your workplace, right? So understand that that is the first step that is very important, which is you would want to identify that, right? So let's see, how do we identify these hazards? Good people, you would want to actually interrogate how certain parts of your workplace, or what I usually call what I actually usually call traffic, right? At work, there is traffic. You do have what we call traffic at workplace. So your traffic, you would want to actually look into your traffic. At workplace. I'll list examples of traffic that we have at workplace in different categories. We do have employees, right? People who are working at our workplace, regardless of which workplace are you at. It can be a construction, it can be a mine, it can be a restaurant, it can be a school, it can be a church, it can be a funeral parlor, it can be anywhere, even a mall or shopping center. Wherever you are working, sometimes you also can be working in the film industry. In the film industry, that's another industry where safety officers are actually needed a lot. It's weird that we don't normally think about that industry, but it is an industry that is actually attracting a lot of safety officers as we speak. All right. So in any industry where you are, in any workplace where you are, you can have workers as your traffic, which means this is a category of people you need to look after as a safety officer. You also have a category of people you need to look after. That's your management, right? Management at your workplace in different categories, in different levels. You would want to take care of them as well, as in as far as hazards are concerned. You would also want to take care of visitors and clients, customers, visitors. These are people who come and go at your workplace. We have got clients, people who come to visit your place because they want to buy something or they want to find out something. You also have visitors in terms of inspectors from Department of Labor, Department of Health, the Department of what you call nowadays is customs, people from Home Affairs, checking whether they are foreigners or whatever they're checking. You would also have municipal workers coming to check for licenses and other things. So there is a lot of inspectors that might come at your workplace. So we can categorize those as visitors and clients. We also have a category of community. Right, communities. Now we are talking about a general community, people who are in your community doing different things. Some of them are pedestrians passing by your site. Some are pedestrians who are going to be passing by your work that you are working. Some are just being affected by your work from a distance. So you should also talk about them. Then you animals, livestock. Right, people do have livestock. People take care of livestock for several reasons. We can also add on pets. People, they have pets as well. Then lastly, we do have your plant, machinery, and equipment. So these are examples of traffic that you would find in a workplace, any workplace. Right. So now these examples of traffics need to be investigated, need to be interrogated. You need to go into them and you should find out things and situations that might cause harm on that, right? So you want to go into these items that I just spoke about, to find out which ones could have a potential to cause harm, right? You would want to find out what? You would want to find out amongst all these things I've listed earlier, what could cause harm, which is hazards. So we have spoken about hazards several times, and it's important to define what a hazard is. A hazard is anything that has a potential to cause harm, right? Usually when two or more hazards collide or meet or act upon each other, then there's going to be an incident. So hazards are anything that can actually have a potential to cause harm unto yourself, right? We can list a lot of examples, and then be able to actually know what hazards are. But let's just get into categorizing them, right? Let's go into categorizing them, or let's talk about where are you going to be able to find these hazards first. You are going to go to physical work environment, where exactly people are working. The physical work environment, you are going to find hazards there on the physical work environment. You are also going to go into equipment, materials, and substances. Equipment, materials, and substances, you are going to find hazards there. You are also going to interrogate work tasks and how they are being performed. Work tasks and how they are being performed. When you interrogate those aspects, you are also going to find hazards there, right? Finally, you would also want to go and find how work is being managed. Find different categories of hazards. I'm just going to read on my table here that I have in front of me here examples of hazards there. Or for those who are attending on Google, let me project to you so that you are able to actually see what I'm talking about. All right, there you are. I'm going to project this screen For those who are attending on different platforms, I am going to read it out for you to understand it. Those who are attending on Google, they will be. And I've just stopped it from making notes. All right. Now back to what we were doing. We are talking about the common hazards that we should expect. Common hazards that we should expect. We have got hazards that are linked to manual tasks, right? Tasks that are manual, they tend to over-exhaust people. People will then get exhausted, right? People will get exhausted when they are exposed to manual tasks. That is why from time to time we tell people that it was long back ago when people could actually be found asking people to dig trenches. Nowadays, people are no longer digging trenches. You are actually using these plants and stuff, such as excavators. Imagine if you were going to ask people to dig trenches using pick and shovel. That task is going to be very manual and people are going to be exhausted. And because the work is repetitive, it will cause them to end up making mistakes and expose them to harm. Another thing that can also be an example of a common hazard is gravity, right? Gravity, we are talking about people working where there are objects that can be able to fall. Objects can fall on you, or you can actually fall yourself, or you can slip and trip, right? This can cause bruises, that can cause fractures, that can cause lacerations. When talking about lacerations, we're referring to cuts, to be cut like a wound cut, dislocations, concussions, permanent injuries, or even death to people. So it is an example of a common hazard. Right, moving on to next, exposure to electricity. Exposure to electricity, of course, you can burn because of electricity. You can even be electrocuted, right, because of electricity. So it is an example of a hazard there. If you continue, you can talk about machinery and equipment. Of course, you can be hit by a vehicle, you can be stumbled by a vehicle, causing a lot of issues. Another example would be hazard chemicals. We can be exposed to chemicals. Extreme pressure, temperatures can also lead to fatigues, heat stroke, and sunburns. Noise, excessive noise can actually damage our hearing abilities. Radiation, biological and psychological hazards. Yes, at work we do have psychological hazards. People who tend to bully us. There are some people who would bully other people, and it's just wrong. So there I was actually listing, or I was making examples of hazards that might be found at workplace. The list is endless, good people. Hazards are everywhere at workplace. It is just important for you as a safety officer to be able to open your eyes and check these hazards. Let's move on now to the next element that we need to talk about, right? That we have found hazards. We need to move on to how you would classify hazards now. Right, you would want to classify your hazards in different classes. Right, you would want to classify your hazards in different classes. Let's talk about physical hazards. Right, physical hazards, there is a list, an endless list of physical hazards. So you would have your physical hazard, you have health hazard, right? basically here we are talking about health hazards. Physical hazards are quite easier because they do affect your body. They do affect you, and you can be able to see that here I've been affected, or here I've been affected, or rather, what can I say, man? For instance, you fall, you can break, you can have a fracture. It's easier for you to see that this has harmed somebody physically, right? This has harmed somebody physically. Unlike if you are talking about a situation where you are talking about health hazards. If you are talking about health hazards, then we're talking about maybe acute toxicity city where people are actually exposed maybe to chemicals that might actually affect your health. Some people, we are talking about corrosion that can irritate your skin. We are also talking about respiratory situation where you are unable to actually breathe. All these ones are examples of hazard. Non-level is saying it's not hearing anything. I don't know. Is that a situation with everyone? How is it now? How is it now? Better? Is it better now? Yes, non-level. If you can, if you can, you raised your hand. Yes. Is it fine now? Okay. It looks like it's back. People can hear me now. All right. Great stuff. Okay. So where was I? Now I've forgotten. Right. We're saying that once you have done your risk assessment and stuff, it will be important now that you go to the next step, which is implementing controls. But before I would reach to the end of the lesson, I'll also project, or what I can actually do is to send it to everyone, an example of a risk assessment template. I'm going to send it to everyone actually, yeah. I'll post it on every platform where we are talking so that people can actually be having access to it. So an example of a risk assessment template will indicate what I'm talking about, or will make sense of what I'm talking about. But in the meantime, what we're going to talk about now is that at the end, it's very important that you also come up with control measures, right? These control measures are very important because when you identify risks and you weigh the risk, right, the last thing that you need to do now is to come up with control measures that you are going to be using to assist. Now, when we are in our workplaces, people would love to complain, people would love to raise issues to the safety officers, the SHIREPs, and everyone who is involved in occupational health and safety. It is very important for people to do that. However, once somebody is raising such, there should be now control measures as to how do we control that particular problem. And that is where you as a safety officer, you come in for you to be able to actually address that. So now the control measures, you need to also understand that when you are now dealing with control measures, you ought to follow a particular sequence of dealing with the hazard. Number one, we need to agree today, right now, that the best option is actually to eliminate a hazard, right? So the best option would be that you would want to eliminate a hazard. So we all strive to say, how best can we eliminate a hazard, right? Unless if we then realize that we are unable to eliminate this hazard, then we need then to move on to the next particular thing that we can actually deal with. And what would that be, right? That would be to say, I have failed to eliminate a hazard. So how about I use a different step altogether? This different step altogether would be trying to substitute the process, substitute the hazard, right? My earlier example was use of a knife. If a knife is a hazard, then can we remove it wherever it's being used so that we cannot use it altogether? That's elimination. But when you realize that it is needed, then we might find ways of substituting it with something else that might also be able to be used in its position. That's what number two, you need to deal with substitution. But if substitution does not work out properly, then you would want to move on to the third step, where you would want to redesign the whole thing, re-engineer the whole thing, so that the process can become user-friendly, or the process can become isolate the hazard, so the hazard cannot be seen or cannot affect anyone anymore. So these are choices that you have as a safety officer before you reach to the last option. Let me just go backwards and start from the beginning. We are saying your first option is to eliminate. The second option is to control, to substitute. Then the third option is for you to what? To re-engineer the process. If all this fails, you need to go to fourth option, which is implementation of administrative controls, right? You would implement administrative controls. You go back to your office, find ways of implementing administrative controls, such as probably training, because now you realize that this hazard is not eliminatable. This hazard cannot be substituted. This hazard cannot be re-engineered. Therefore, let me train people on how to use it. So it's an administrative example of an administrative control. Or you can then say, these four ways have failed. I've failed to eliminate. I've failed to substitute. I've failed to re-engineer. I've failed to implement administrative controls. What am I left with? I must then say, let them use PPE. So you introduce PPE as the last option on control measures. PPE is not the first option on control measures. So you will see that is what we call a hierarchy of control. All right. Now, in a nutshell, good people, this is what we wanted to discuss about in terms of hazard identification, risk assessment, and control. What I'm going to do now is that I'm going to post on WhatsApp, and I'm also going to post on our learning platforms on our courses so that you can be able to see an example of a risk assessment template. Let's analyze that template. Let's talk about that template, and we can meet on discussions. I also wanted to indicate to every learner out there that we are using an online system, and that's the only option we can be able to communicate easily. So most of the things they are going to be posted on social media, some posted on WhatsApp, but the best place to find where we are going to be talking about things is actually when you log into your learning management system, and you are going to find things that I'm posting there. Right, good people. When a course has started, especially a safety officer course, it has got 30 days for it to finish. Right, you can finish it in 15 days, but you have got 30 days to finish it. So as we are speaking right now, I would be expecting everyone to have finished this course by 30 April. Right. When I talk about finishing course, I'm referring to finishing submitting assessments, submitting assignment, submitting the tests. All right, then you are done with me. The other issues in terms of payment and other things, you deal with that with admin or admin staff. With me, what I expect is everyone needs to complete his or her work so that I can give you your results, or I can indicate to you that what are the results saying and stuff like that. Now, without further ado, I can see people joining. We have already covered much of the part of the lesson, and more notes are going to be posted on our learning platform. But for now, can I open an opportunity for people to ask questions? So if you can just raise your hand, and if I lower it, you open your mic and we talk if you have got any questions. Questions, good people? Anybody with questions? Samgelisi, where any questions, love? Langamandla, Nonwebo, Lindsay, any questions? So if there are no questions, no one is raising hand, no one is asking questions, I'm gonna go to the LMS and post what I've promised, and then we'll meet again tomorrow, same time, where we can discuss. Please bring in questions so that we can be able to answer them. Yes, yes, Dangamandla. Okay, you can open your mic and talk. Right? Yeah, are you able to unmute your mic so that we can hear you? Right. It seems like I can't seem to be able to hear you. In that case, of course, we can always resort to discussing on other platforms such as our learning platform or WhatsApp, since we could not hear each other here. All right. So I'm going to close today's meeting, and then we meet tomorrow.